Hey everyone, welcome back to the Financing Simplified podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Venuto, here with InTouch Mortgage Solutions. And today I am joined by a good friend of mine I've known for quite some time. I'm going to bring on Nick Stillo from One Urban. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about what projects you're working on. I mean, this is the housing situation that we're in right now in Canada. I thought, what else? Who better than to bring on a builder and developer to have this conversation?
Well, before I start, I need to give a shout out to my daughter, Victoria, who asked me this morning to give her a shout out. So shout out to Victoria. Love you, sweetheart.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show. So One Urban is a family-run, multidisciplinary real estate company. We have developments in commercial, in retail, as well as multifamily, developments in condos, as well as in purpose-built rentals.
That's amazing. And that's exactly why we've been talking about it, whether it would be on camera, off camera, on Instagram, social. We've met up a couple times to really pick your brain about how this whole housing crisis sort of come to be. And from your perspective as person that's building, what this country so desperately needs is these purpose-built rentals. What are you finding? Like, obviously, as a builder, there's a lot of myths and truths with what's happening today. And tell me, what do you think are some of the biggest hurdles that are being put in front of builders today and developers today?
Approvals. Yeah. Wait times.
And what are some of those wait times?
They can vary. And legislation says we're supposed to have site plan approval in 60 days. In the city of Toronto, you're lucky if you get it in 60 months.
And with the higher density projects, from the day that you, let's say, acquire the land, tell me, walk me through the process of going through the land acquisition, building a higher density like the condos. How long does it take to get from start to finish?
So it really varies. But I can tell you from one example, we're currently building a purpose-built rental building in the town of Oakville. We purchased that property in 2016. We got our final approvals in 2021 in the spring, and we started building in the summer of 2021. So you're looking at a 5-year development time from the time that we acquired the land to the time that we actually got approvals and the permits to put a shovel in the ground. You're looking at 5 years. And then you're looking at, depending on the size of the building, could be 2, 3, even 4 years to build. It really just depends on the size and scale of it.
So it takes that long to get the process started. And you're saying, would you say that the red tape, the bureaucracy around it is probably one of the biggest hurdles that you would be facing right now?
It's the most time consuming, definitely. And it is a huge hurdle. Yeah.
And I guess in today's environment, if let's say you want to build more projects, obviously the financing component of it, like how do these deals pencil? Like what are sort of the thought process when someone like yourself would go through the process to try to, figure out, hey, is this a viable option for us to get this project started? And what are some of the pros and cons that you would say that you would look at when you're going to go through this process? I know we were talking about one that you were maybe, I don't know if you want to discuss it or not, what you're going through.
So I can tell you from a condo perspective, and I'll debunk the popular belief that developers make money hand over fist. Those days are gone. Your really good projects are making 15%. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, 15% is still huge on a $100 million or $200 million project, which is very, very easy to have costs of that nature in a project. But you also have to remember that the developer is putting up the upfront cost for the land, upfront cost for the development, upfront cost for the application fees, which are huge, upfront cost for the all the consultant fees, upfront costs for the permit fees until they ever even get to put a shovel in the ground. And then they have to go through construction. So if we go back to that purpose-built rental building, we put up the upfront cost in 2016 to buy that land. We put all the upfront costs for all the architecture, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $600,000 for a project of that scale. We put up all the upfront cost for the engineering. So your structural engineering is about $150,000 for a project of that scale. Your landscaping architect is about another $25,000 to $30,000. Your planning fees are anywhere between $50,000 to $75,000. Your engineering for mechanical and electrical is about another $150,000. And then there's all kinds of other fees that are little hidden ones. Your surveying fees, your arborist study fees. In that particular case, it was a heritage building, so we had a heritage impact assessment that needed to be done. These are all little fees that add up just to go back to how much you're actually making. You might, on a good project, good project, you'll make 15%. Most projects are actually hovering between 8 to 10% profit margins. And the thing that gets me is you've got most people that have absolutely no idea what it takes to go into a development, no idea what the upfront capital requirements are for a development, are constantly complaining about developers making money. They make money. Oh, it's a greedy developer. It's a greedy developer. Well, let's remember one thing. Now, number one, the house that you live in was built by a developer. The condo that you live in was built by a developer. They put up all that risk. And at the end, they were lucky if they came out with 8 to 10%. Like I said, a good project is about 15% project margin. But most projects are actually getting anywhere between 8 to 10. So let me draw a comparison here. Do you eat burgers?
Yes, I do.
Do you ever put condiments on your burgers?
I love to.
Like ketchup?
Ketchup, 100%.
Heinz?
Sure.
Typically
Local.
your go-to, right? French's?
French's, yeah.
Right? They're making way more than 15%. But did you ever go to your local supermarket and complain to the cashier that Heinz or French's shouldn't make 30% on that product? No.
Never.
You buy it, you don't think about it. You go home, you put it on your burger, and everybody's happy. Your stomach's happy. Why is it the developers are getting so much bad publicity for making money? I mean, we are a for-profit business.
And that actually begs the question with, when you look at it, and I've always been an advocate for this, is as a private entity, as a person who's, looking to put food on their table and provide for your family, these deals have to make sense to you.
Of course.
You're not going to go into business to lose money. Nobody is. Nobody in their right mind is going to do that. How are we going to see the government play out? Like we hear some of the electoral promises from some of the upcoming, parties here in Canada. Let's say that Pierre Poilievre with the Conservatives, where they want to incentivize building, right? They want to give these incentives that if you hit these certain criterias, that you're going to get the funding from the municipality and from the government. But if the builder doesn't have the ability to say, hey, this deal is going to work or not going to work, and like you said, all these fees are going to get played in, right? Then you have to wait 5 to 6 years. How do you know what's going to happen in the market? All that risk, how does that work? How are builders going to turn around and say, okay, they want to incentivize it? We talked about, obviously things like removing the GST from the actual purpose-built rentals, which is up your alley. But obviously, like when you think about those particular things, the housing affordability? Was it the housing fund accelerator, where that $4 billion the Liberal government afford? How is it going to change the game for builders? What elements are the builders most conscientious of?
So there's a few things. Bill 23 that was introduced last year reduces the development charges on purpose-built rental buildings. So, and it's a tiered reduction. If you're building a 3-bedroom, it's a 25% reduction on the development charge. If you're building a 2-bedroom, it's a 20% reduction. And if you're building a 1-bedroom, it's a 15% reduction. So that's a start. And that helps to move that needle a little bit more towards the purpose-built rental side, because purpose-built rentals traditionally, at least in the last 30 years, have not made sense. From a financing perspective, there's a debt service coverage ratio that needs to be met when you are financing these things. So if the project looks viable, but it's not making enough to cover that debt service coverage, guess what? You're just not going to get the financing. No bank is going to come in there and finance it. So by reducing that development charge, is actually moving that needle a little bit closer to being able to make that project a viable project. Bill 23 also introduced a complete exemption of development charges on purpose-built rentals that are affordable. That moves the needle even more. And now with the federal government announcing just a couple of weeks ago that they're removing the GST on purpose-built rentals, it really just moves that needle really past the point where now a lot more projects that previously weren't feasible are now becoming feasible as purpose-built rentals. I mean, we just saw last week Dream, who's a big developer based out in Western Canada that have a huge presence here in Toronto, typically as condo developers, are now committing to building 5,000 purpose-built rentals across the country because of the removal of the GST. That is a huge thing. So I think that from a legislative standpoint and from a government standpoint, removing all of these hurdles like the development charges, like the complete exemptions on purpose-built that are affordable, and now with this GST, it helps a lot. But, and there's a huge but here, that's from a federal level. Even the provincial government is doing a lot. I mean, the provincial government is the one that introduced Bill 23 and Bill 109, which help purpose-built rentals tremendously. But then you got the municipal level. And the municipal level, City of Toronto, for example, raised development charges 49% last year. So how do you have a federal and a provincial government that are trying to incentivize developers to build more purpose-built rentals, because that's really what we need, and then you have the municipality that's working counterintuitively?
Is that the
Against
NISBYism, or not in my backyard? Are you finding a lot of that?
NIMBY is huge, and it's a real thing. A lot of people really like seeing new development. They just really don't want it in their backyard. I talk to a lot of people that have grown kids that are old enough to be moving out of their house but can't, because they can't afford the rent. They certainly can't afford the down payment to buy. So they're stuck living in their parents' basement. But yet when the new tower goes up on Highway 7 in Vaughan, everybody's all up in arms about it. They don't want it. But where are your kids going to live, guys?
I find that I've said this a couple times, and it's always the same. Everybody wants to talk about affordable housing, but nobody wants their home to be affordable.
Or near one.
Or near something that's affordable. And we were having this conversation. It was, what do we define as affordable? We were talking about CMHC's standard where it was like 30% of your income. But I mean, in reality, in Toronto right now, it's closer to 90, if not 95% and more.
Of your income goes to rent. Yes.
It's absolutely bonkers that we're living in a society where people can we're actually putting up all that money out for rent, but yet what is affordable? That's what I'm saying. Like, when we think about the idea, can we actually properly define it? Like, you've gone through this process and you've been talking about affordable housing. Side note, CMHC, right? So CMHC, we're talking about CMHC. What types of programs are sort of available through CMHC that maybe some of our viewers are not aware of, right? Because most people know Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, they provide statistical data for the government, housing needs, housing starts, blah, blah, blah. But they also provide insurance for insured mortgages. But they also do a lot of work behind the scenes to help try, I guess, and bring this to the forefront. And the reason why I'm asking this is because last week, Christopher Freeland introduced that there's another $20 billion on the table that is going to be going towards helping create more affordable purpose-built rentals.
So CMHC actually has two programs that are geared towards developers to incentivize the building of purpose-built rentals. So the first one is RCFI, which is called Rental Construction Financing Initiative. Mm-hmm. We actually have a deal with CMHC under RCFI. That's our Oakville project, where they incentivize developers in their terms of the financing of the project itself through construction, as well as your takeout and your term mortgage. So under a typical rental construction financing with a traditional lender, your amortization is 30 years max, where CMHC extends that out to 50 years, which makes it a lot more feasible to meet that debt service coverage. Additionally, their loan to cost, their LTCs are a lot higher on the rental construction financing program because they want to incentivize purpose-built rentals that are affordable. And you can have a mix of them, really. You can kind of play with those levers and have a few affordable units. Maybe you might have a building that scores a little bit of points on the energy efficiency, and maybe you might have a little bit of accessible units. And you can play with those levers enough where if you generate 100 points, which is the requirement for the MLI Select, they will underwrite the deal, they will issue a certificate of insurance, and then you can take that note to any traditional lender, CIBC, Scotia, any of the big banks, even Equitable and Meridian. A lot of guys are doing those deals, and they will fund the deal with CMHC as the insurer of the project. So it's a really good program. Amortization terms are anywhere between 40 to 50 years, depending on how many points you score. So it's equally as good as the RCFI, but a very different program than the RCFI. Again, RCFI is geared more towards affordable, whereas the MLI Select allows the developer to push and pull on those levers that I mentioned before.
That's really interesting, actually, because when you think about all those levers and the capacity that maybe, would you say that these programs were already there for some time? Maybe they're just getting more attention now? Or those are the type of people, like the builders, that would have to know that those programs are available to them?
So RCFI was introduced I believe in 2017, and it was originally introduced with a $4 billion fund that went quickly. And then they increased that fund to $6 billion. And now Chrystia Freeland just announced that they're adding another $20 billion to the fund. MLI Select, I believe, is about 2 years old. So no, these programs haven't always been there. They have been designed as of recent years to incentivize developers for more affordable housing. So, you know, kudos to the Liberal government for really stepping up to the plate for affordability and for purpose-built rentals in general.
I think as we were talking about too, was that we haven't seen this type of action plan for purpose-built rentals in the last 30 years, probably? Easy 30, 40 years.
Yep.
And to get through this process, like obviously nothing comes easy, right? I mean, you mentioned earlier all the fees, the architectural stuff, everything that goes into planning this project. When you go to CMHC, do you actually have to have all this already prepared for them?
You've got to have a shovel-ready program.
So
you've got to be ready to go.
So you have to basically you're forking up all this capital, putting yourself in this leverage situation before you even know if you're going to get that certificate from CMHC.
So you have to, with MLI Select, you have to have, the project needs to go into the ground within 6 months of the approval. With RCFI, you have to go into the ground as soon as you're approved. So you basically have to be ready to pull the construction and mobilize your trades.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. So, Nick, what I gather from you now is it's a very challenging situation to, it's not something that is very easy. What advice would you give to, let's say, someone who wants to start their journey in maybe in multifamily, start to become a developer, a real estate builder? What advice would you give to someone to start this journey?
What I would tell people is to start small. Buy a property in the city of Toronto where now the approvals are expedited to have multiple units on a single property, and the zoning allows for multiple units. So, buy a property that perhaps is a tear down and put a fourplex on it, put a building with 6 units on it, something small. You don't necessarily need to start like we did our first condo of 79 units with the retail and residential combined. You can start by building 4 units, 6 units. They don't even have to be condos. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of buying and keeping what you build. So, they can build multifamily and start really small. I met a gentleman the other day who's actually about 10 years younger than I am. I'm 42. And he's doing exactly that. And I had asked him, how many units do you have? And he said he had 33 doors. I was impressed. At 33, I didn't have, at 32, 33, I didn't have 33 doors.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Well, for sure. Yeah. Start small. Now, is he making an income from it? Probably not. He's probably cash flowing. He would have to in order for his bank to finance him. But he's got a mortgage on 33 units that are slowly being reduced while that equity is being increased. And now that's leverage. And now he's able to take that leverage on 33 doors and pull out a whole bunch of capital that he can then redeploy into either A, buying a multifamily building. Nobody says you have to build it. He can just go out and buy one, or buy a piece of land that he turns into a development land and then starts slowly.
Rome wasn't built in one day, right?
That's right.
The whole idea. And if you guys like this conversation, we're going to be back with Nick and One Urban in the next episode. But Nick, to end off this episode, where can they find you on social media?
Oneurban.ca.
Oneurban.ca.
And that's across our website as well as our Instagram and Facebook.
Well, they can always find us on our website at intouchmortgagesolutions.com. You can find us on social media at InTouch Mortgages on YouTube. And our podcasts are obviously on Spotify and Apple iTunes. All the great places where you can find podcasts.